So a big round of applause for Kavita and Daeng and for being here to talk to us. Yeah, and thank you so much to Daeng for offering this space to us. Pandanoodle is a really wonderful community space and also provider of delicious food. We were here also last night to get mapo tofu and dandan noodles. I think we've got to be here more often. Daeng is the owner of this wonderfully conceptualized restaurant, ThePandanoodle, and she opened it in 2016. And since then, it's not only known for their tasty dishes, but also places for pop-ups and supporting BIPOC community. And Kavita has been a really amazing pillar in the Berlin food scene and Europe's food scene, originally from the UK, but really builder of bridges and connector of people and communities through food. She's also a part of Mygration and a wonderful, powerful woman and also a new mama. To a really cute baba. Power woman. So Daeng and Kavita, they are on the core team of a collective called Smells Like. And during the COVID-19 shutdown, they collaborated with other BIPOC in the food industry to offer a space for them to sell their goods that can be enjoyed in the safety of homes. So Smells Like does not only do these mini markets, they are also a collective that brings people who use food history and heritage to celebrate and negotiate their identities in Europe. The group consists of chefs, community cooks, restaurant owners, food writers, budding cooks, and food lovers in the BIPOC community. Using culinary storytelling, they gather together on a regular basis to celebrate and discuss our food culture, feast over the delicious foods of their heritage, and forge new friendships with amazing people. Thank you so much again for joining me here today. I really wanted to speak to these two about food because they have really a wonderful insight and have been working in the industry for such a long time. And it's something that we connected over also. And it is an all-sensory experience that ties many friendships together, but I believe it's a tool that also breaks down barriers between communities. And as we know from Smells Like, it has forged deep bonds with the people who are at the core team, but also ones who just join. You make people feel so welcome. And could you tell us a little bit more about the collective in your own words?
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Vicky, for organizing this and bringing so many people together. After all of this COVID time, to be honest with you, it's heartwarming to see beautiful people gather. So thank you to everyone in the Mygration organization. I will say it from my perspective or just for me after I worked maybe about 10 years or 9 years in the food kind of scene in Berlin mainly. And a lot of the business that I was doing was organizing markets or platforms or food events for people to come and share their food culture through food and encouraging people to basically set up food businesses to support themselves with their entrepreneurial ideas, but also like you kind of alluded to in your introduction, I believe that food is a great tool to share culture and kind of engage in conversation as well, and connect people, bring people together. And so the majority of the projects that I was doing that. But what I realized after quite a few years of being in Berlin was that I was surrounded by whiteness, and I was surrounded by, let's say, a white perspective on what food and enjoying great food means. And so that was, I found myself not having the conversations that I really wanted to have and that I really needed to have in these spaces because, I couldn't talk about problems with structural racism. I couldn't talk about problems that I was having with the patriarchy. I couldn't talk about all of these deep issues that impact my life and my identity making, which I connect through food. And so I wasn't having those conversations with the people that I was with, even though I had like great business relationships with them and we could like gather over great food and we could enjoy great food together, there was a depth to the conversation that I was missing. And I think it was like it was something that I realized when I did connect with other BIPOC folk over food, the food like took us to places and to deep places to talk about our history making, our identity making, our sense of belonging here, our sense of, it was always a sense to kind of like connect transnationally, I would say, but to talk about food on our terms, you know, and not to talk about food or to enjoy food in an essentialized way or a way that kind of exotifies our ethnicity, but use it as a way to share our stories and our real stories. And so that was really missing for me. And I really I actually left, I stopped all of my projects and left to go to London to study the connection between identity, power, and food and gastronomy. And when I came back to Berlin, I wasn't quite sure I was going to come back. I realized that if I was to come back, I really needed a space or a community, a set of friends around me that I could like continue this conversation with. And so I met folks like Daeng and other folks in the group, and we decided to create this group called Smells Like, to have the conversation on our terms basically, and enjoy the food on our terms. So
maybe a quick note on how we came up with the name Smells Like. In what was it, winter 2018, Kavita just walks in the Pandanoodle in the evening, was dark already, and she was just like, listen, I have to talk about something to you. And then we just sat down in that corner over there, was not busy. So, and she told me about the idea of like building this collective and this community, and also that she feels the urge after working like all the jobs that she did before, just coming back and wants to settle and also wants to give back to the community in a way. So, and then we started to talk about like our personal experiences as brown girls growing up in like white environments and countries, and I think if you talk about all POC people here, which to that point I was not really aware of, having the same experiences in school when you just unpack your lunchbox that you brought, and it was not when your mom like, you know, made me like Thai food or gave me like the fermented pork sausage to school, which is like really, really tangy and really smelly and a lot of garlic. And Kavita had the same experience. You open the lunchbox and like a bunch of kids, they would just say like, ew, wow, you smell so weird. Or like, you know, throughout your whole childhood, you would hear the phrase, what's the smell that is you carrying around? And so we came up with the name of like Smells Like, because we wanted to call it Smells Like Curry first. But what was like our first event? It's like having 3 different kinds of curries, but we just stick to Smells Like because everybody else has, of course, other experiences. But all like, I heard so many stories about other people telling you that you smell so different. What is that smell? And it's like, that's how my home smells like. And I think it's amazing. But also, there's a lot of shame around your own identity, because, you know, you want to be like one of the popular white girls, which you aren't, and then you are the one who smells weird also. And it takes a lot of energy to get back to your identity and find pride in it. But it's a struggle.
I mean, this goes into my next question, actually, of I've been through this process where food can be very disempowering, especially when you're trying to find your identity in a predominantly white society as not a white person, as BIPOC. And how now, when we're finding a community, how much of that shifts and how much of that becomes much more of an empowering tool. And so maybe you want to share with us how food has allowed you overcome certain things, and through this community, it smells like, has it also enabled for more healing and more rising together, and like just kind of building upon the identities that you want to celebrate?
Complex question.
Yeah, you just touched upon it with like school and everything, but maybe looking at it further of how you did it with the community and.
With the community, I didn't grow up with the BIPOC POC community, I have to say, because I grew up in a very, very small German village, and we were like the only non-white family in the middle of it. And in school, I also was the only brown person for many, many years. The only other non-German kids would be Polish and Russian. And they didn't smell as weird as I smell. But, and also, so I never belonged there. Then I came to Berlin, which is like diverse, but also I couldn't, you know, when I went to Dongchuan Center or to Thai Park, I saw like this beautiful Thai and Vietnamese communities, which also weren't welcoming to me, because I'm not one of those Thais anymore, because I grew up here. For them, I'm white. When I go back to Thailand, they would never guess that I'm actually also born and lived in Thailand for the first years of my life. And to be honest, so my environment and my friends are predominantly white, and therefore there was like no much talk and identifying through food with them, you know. I think everything started just because, like, most of my life until I was a grown up, I was ashamed of not having this heritage and this background, you know. But that, yeah, I don't know, to be aware of how important food is in my life just started basically when my mom left to Thailand and was left alone when I was 16, and I had to start to cook myself, which I never been taught to. So everything just came out of I had to remember how my mom would do it with all the things, because she just left basically overnight. So all the sauces and ingredients would be there. So I just remember how she did it and just recreate it. And so I kept on recreating some kind of a home or a mom home, by myself when I was young. And out of that, it became a craft, you know. And then I moved to Berlin and had the access to all the great Asian supermarket. And yeah, now I forgot what was the question. And then then we found It Smells Like Collective, and that broadened my world so much and opened so many doors to so many other cultures, which I never had access to before. And I mean, Kavita is really a master in bringing people together, and I don't know, she's just she cracks every nut. So and that is empowering to see other people having the same experiences and the same stories of being in a white country and have to recreate a sense of home through food, because you don't get it anywhere here. So and that's where I for the first time see what a great value it is to have that, and that cooking and food is just something that we run on every day. And I'm proud of that where I come from, that my culture is so strongly intertwined with food culture and cooking itself, because that's really helped me, that soul search of, and also being proud of where I come from. And it took a long while until now, and it will continue to grow, I think.
Yeah. So basically, I think I'm going to try and answer the question with some thoughts that I've got in my head. So I think I learned like quite early on that like food can be a way to like negotiate your identity. And I learned that through my mom, because actually my mom, I grew up with an abusive father. My father was a horrible person, and my mom like struggled to like run a family in that context, right? And through all of like her kind of community making and her own identity making, on reflection, I see how she negotiated her identity through her food practice. And so there were times when, for example, I'm of Punjabi Indian descent, and my mom stood up in the community against my father, which was seen as something super like radical, but also shameful, you know, like why was she standing up against like an Indian man, and why was she kind of bringing shame on the community? And during that period of time, if I look at her food, the food that she was making wasn't Indian. The food that she was making at that time was actually influenced by a community that gave her the support, and that didn't come from the other aunties within our group. That came from her, like, we had her best friend was Persian, her other friend was Ecuadorian, like she made friends with other migrants in the area, and that impacted kind of like the diet that I ate. And what it made me realize is that like we're not born with this kind of like mass simple food identity. I don't just eat Indian food because my parents were Indian, right? Actually, the food that I grew up with and the food that I eat today speaks to the history and the experiences of like belonging, but like they're like my parents' own identity making. And I think that once I realized that, wow, that the food that we create on a daily basis tells so many layered stories about who we are, I found it like really important to like, you know, own this as a way to like think about my own identity making. And I was challenged by that when I moved here. I always had I grew up in Birmingham. Birmingham is 52% non-white. It's the second biggest city in the UK. Like my environment I grew up in a white working class neighborhood, but between like all of the non-white kids stuck together, and my upbringing was diverse. It was complicated by diversity, you know. When I moved to Berlin, it was the first time I was really in a white environment. And it was also the first time that I had this like, oh, can you cook Indian food for me? And oh, wow, I would love to eat something like authentically Indian. And I have to say, like in the first few years, I really performed to that because it gave me a sense of place. It was a way for me to also connect and link up to people here. And like, I did a lot of like cooking Indian food, which is maybe something that wasn't so, it wasn't like a norm for me, but it spoke to like my way of trying to like connect with people here too, you know, like I did that as I performed a sense of Indianness, which maybe wasn't really me, you know, but it was a way to like connect with like white people in Berlin who were interested in like my heritage, but had a very flattened understanding of what my heritage was because of the color of my skin and because of like my background. So actually what I really enjoy about the collective is that as we all like are here, we all have like stories of like displacement. We all have stories of migration. We all have stories of diversity with which we carry with us. And I think that often in like white societies, when we're told to represent who we are through our food, we have to do it by representing our ethnicity, you know? So, okay, Daeng is Thai, so she better be cooking Thai food. and Kavita, oh yeah, you're Indian, okay, so you better be cooking Indian food. But actually, there wasn't a space for me to be like, you know what? Like, actually, my friends were like, my best friend was Nigerian, my other best friend was Colombian and Greek. We love cooking food from the Otto Lengi cookbook. And also Jamie Oliver, yeah, he influenced how I cook too. And when I cook, my food speaks to that story, you know? And I think within the Smells Like collective, yes, it was a way for us to talk about our heritage and our roots, but also there was space to think like, we have these relationships with like diverse people, and that impacts how we cook, and that tells a story of like our non-essentialized identities. And it was actually only in the space of like Smells Like that I felt free from this idea that I have to cook to serve my ethnicity, you know? So this was a really beautiful thing, I think, about Smells Like, that actually, yeah, we carry very complicated stories with us, and we can talk those through in our food practice.
Hold on to that. Thank you so much for that. I think it was really important to say, because as Mygration Festival wants to highlight the differences of people, even though they belong to certain communities, and there are likenesses, every individual is so different, and also within food. And I don't know if you've also had this experience of like someone not coming from, having no heritage or anything, knowing something more about the heritage's food, and you're like, oh damn, that's like, what the hell am I? And then you question our identity, and we're always, I think, struggling with trying to fulfill what it is from the white perspective, from the Western perspective of what it is that we're supposed to hold and uphold. And I mean, what I wanted, what you already elaborated on, was how it really allowed for this openness of breaking down barriers, connecting people. And as we live in a very globalized society more and more, and transculturalism is such an important key of that, what do you hope more people kind of, I mean, Smells Like is only for BIPOC, and I think it's important because there's a lot of healing to be done, and we want to make it as much of a safer space as possible. But what do you hope through this platform that other people can kind of try and understand, and to give us this space also? What is it that you would like to maybe say to other people also, what Smells Like goals are for them, or for the wider community, wider society?
Do you want to answer that one? So, okay, I really believe that like that everyone has a food voice, and that food voice is a language, and it speaks to like spaces within us and histories within us that maybe we don't have words that can like eloquently describe our experiences. And so for me, I think it's like a space like Smells Like should be for us to locate that food voice, and locate that voice, and have a space to understand what that language is for us, without having this power structure put on us by saying like, okay, you know, you're Vietnamese, so you need to be concentrating on like proving that we can eat authentic Vietnamese food, or whatever, you know, like these fetishizations, these ideas that like whiteness like kind of directs where we should be going and what we should be doing, and how that translates into what we should be cooking or what we should be serving. I think like for me, the hope for myself and like for the people that I've built friendships with in Smells Like is that we nurture our own voice outside of that structure. Because also when we do live in white societies, and we do have relationships with whiteness, and we do have loving relationships with whiteness. And I think it's only until we are empowered to understand what our language is and what our voice is that we can also share that in that context, you know, without like, it's about being empowered, that we know that we have this language and voice, and then speaking about it on our terms when we get into white spaces. So that's what, yeah, Smells Like is for me personally.
I think Kavita said it all. It's just like to me, I think I'm one of the one who's like not eloquently like able to express myself. That's why I'm just into cooking mostly. But with that, what helps me is like, you know, there's like with smells, like it's just like when we talk or when we have our meetings, I mean, I learned so much about also be aware of my own language, like how many angles and perspectives things can have, and also just to step out of my own narrowness and in a place of frustration and anger also, because that just pushed me in like leave me in the corner, like very paralyzed for like a lot of times in my life, and just keep rolling, you know. So in this white society, and I never knew that I would need a collective and a BIPOC collective and community to feel empowered and proud, because I thought I have to make it in this whiteness and in this society as a Thai woman, but that's not true. You know, it's just like, I mean, I live in a white country in a white city, but it doesn't mean that I don't own it. Also, you know, I have like rights and ambitions and passions also. Yeah.
So this next question is mainly for you, Daeng, because I wanted to talk a little bit about Pandanoodle and how it sells, let's say, Asian fusion food. And the term Asian food has been widely discussed as a way that racism continues and is upheld because it's very complex. But essentially, it supports the notion that all Asians are the same, right? Especially East and Southeast. And acknowledging the difference is never really essential. And while I understand it's like necessary to sell food that adheres to the demand of the market, how much of that hinders you from what you really want to be doing? Or are you happy doing this kind of food because it's something that you love doing? And damn, it's tasty. But it's like, how much are you doing for the market, and how much do you wish you could do more for you?
I mean, the food that I'm doing is I never claim to say I'm doing like authentic Chinese noodle dishes, because this is something that I'm half Chinese also, but I've never was in touch with the Chinese part of my family. So getting to Chinese noodle dishes and recipes, it's kind of also an identity search. So with Chinese food, I would never, there I'm like very, very careful of what I research and what I do to pay it respect, but never call it authentic. So, but with the food that I serve here, there is no compromise that I'm doing, because I don't know, because the way that I learned cooking and I remember cooking and how I was like unconsciously educated by my mom through food is that I kind of don't know how to cook differently, you know, how would I make the shortcuts of like what should I leave out, or I was not growing up on a white tongues flavors, so and I just do what I can do best, and I mean, it sounds stupid, but I don't know how to cook badly, if to say so, you know? Like, I would never make a Thai curry and put, I don't know, red bell pepper in it and tomatoes and weird stuff, you know? Because I could not know how to make it wrongly. And this is not what I want to do. It's like everything that is spicy, it is spicy, and people are really afraid to come here, and they ask, is it German spice? I don't even know what German spiciness is. Does it mean that it's not spicy then? Then no, then it's not German spice. So I kind of don't know how to cook other than that.
Really glad that you don't know how to, because I love what you do. So I don't know if we have enough time for this, I'm going to kind of like throw it out there if you want to talk a little bit about it. We talked about it also in Feminist Food Club, the notion of authentic food and who decides on what is authentic, because usually it's put upon us that, or the people who claim that this is not authentic don't actually usually come from the heritage itself. And even if they do come from these lands where the food derives from, it changes over time, it changes from place also. So how dangerous do you think it is to use this term of authentic food? It's the last difficult question, sorry.
I mean, there is like not that one explanation what authenticity is. I mean, I think my Thai food origin is different than Toussaint or any other Thai person. I would say to me, it's also like, because it has become such a hip word in the food industry in the past years that, to be honest, to me, it kind of lost any meaning, anyways, and was never like a selling point to me to go to some specific restaurant. And I feel like when it comes to gastronomy, if someone really insists on saying they are really authentic, then I think it's bullshit. So to me, it's just like a really hollow word by now, right? It's just doesn't speak to me.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have problems with this word authentic. But I think it's complicated because I know, for example, that part of me longs to find like restaurants where I can connect with Punjabi food that transports me to a kind of like a romance of like a heritage which I never had because I grew up in Birmingham, or that transports me to like a space which I remember of like our community creating of Punjabi people in Birmingham, you know? And this is maybe the closest of what I think is authentic. Like the word authentic means to me, it's something which is super honest. It's something which is rooted. It tells like an honest story about place and about soil and about a connection to like the earth and how that's transported through food. And so I sometimes have that, like I long for it, but that's like, I would say within like in my brown kind of identity. But I think I've also been, I would say like oppressed by the authenticity police, and those authenticity police are often white. And that is because, you know, like, yeah, when in the 70s, 80s and 90s, when food or like consuming quote unquote ethnic food became a sign of like culturedness, and it became a sign of how like open-minded and how multicultural white people can be if they understand and they know like what is authentic. It became like this mark of power. And then like I think for a lot of people, a lot of like brown people or racialized people in the West, like they had to perform to that authenticity, right? And it was super dangerous. I think it's like super dangerous for folks who are not then free to like I said, like the types of things that I said before, like share their own food language on their own terms, but actually have to like perform to this idea of what they should be serving as a marker of authenticity, which is dictated by like whiteness or white ideas of what authentic should be. And white people are obsessed with that, right? So there's that. And then I also see how even within like BIPOC communities, we like have that inner police state of mind, right? And we start policing the authenticity of our own communities and what they're cooking. And then we start saying like, oh, you know, like the Indian food in Berlin is like not authentic, and I'm looking for like real Indian authentic food. And I think that we should be conscious about like the language that we're using in that way, and like the power that we also kind of like bring to a forefront when we do that policing within our own communities as well, because I think it's important to like understand why this food is being made and why we also are putting our own labels of like authenticity on it and policing on those terms, because yeah, I think rather than kind of like rubbishing restaurants in Berlin for not being authentic to what we wish they would be, we should maybe look to the stories that are being told through that food, like because I think that's much more interesting to share and to like empower other people in our community that maybe don't have much of a voice or a platform. And you know, like I ask myself, why is it that like actually the majority of Pakistani people who are cooking in Indian restaurants are serving a very specific type of food, which I have never seen actually, even in the UK, like food which is like filled with cream. That's because they innovated, they created a new palette of food, which made it was like a new genre of like Indian food that was palatable to white German people, not just like white people in the UK. It wouldn't even fit with white people in the UK, but it's very German specific. It speaks to understanding like what German palate likes about certain food. And I think that's amazing. When we start to excavate those stories within our communities, we can talk about different authenticities there, you know, and like different stories. So yeah.
Thank you for that.
I remember like the first conversation that we had when she was here, we were also talking about this topic of like how things change when like, you know, the generation of Vietnamese and Thai people started to have like this Thai and Vietnamese imbisses, and they do the curries, how they do it with deep fried ducks and tofu and all that things, red, green, or whatever there is. And everybody was happy with that until like a couple of years ago, food became like such a trend and a train that everybody wants to hop on. And out of the sudden, those restaurants and imbisses are not good enough anymore, because there are like food bloggers out there claiming to know how an authentic Thai curry has to taste like, and start to shit on like, you know, those businesses that were here for 30 years already, like my parents' generation, your parents' generation, who just try to make like their living here and just try to speak to the white palate. And now like, yeah, now they are like on the, I don't know, they're just not, yeah, now they are shitting on because they're not authentic. And just, and that frustrates me so much, because now again, like, you know, we have to adjust and find a way to be on the map again. And how the Indian food or Pakistani food or Thai food was here that we past 30 years was good enough until now. And yeah, I feel sad about it when I see it. Yeah. Sorry, just cannot find word for it. But we talked about it earlier.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's we could talk about it forever because it's shifting forever. But I definitely have this also where I don't eat pho here anymore, because I'm from a Chinese family, but my father's from Vietnam. And I think what I realize is that I only like my dad's pho because of the way he cooks it and the way he serves it and the way I get to get it first because I'm the youngest of the family. And actually it was really nice because my partner is also Chinese Dijil but Vietnamese, and he cooked pho for me and his sister. And this was a moment where I realized I only like it because of the connection of family and connection of heritage. And it's so difficult to then enjoy other people doing it when they make it in a different way. And then but I have definitely been guilty of like shitting on other restaurants for them not making it like my dad, and this is just ridiculous. But it's like, serve me first. But no, what I wanted to ask you both now is that, so you're both mamas. I think your son is here, right?
Hi.
No? He snuck in. How you're utilizing food to have your child kind of not pass on your legacy, but connect to your heritage and connect to their heritage.
I think this is something that you appreciate when you're bigger, when you're grown up. As when I look at my story, but I mean, basically the Pandanoodle exists just because of my son, right? Because when he was little and started to eat solid food, he would refuse to eat rice, which was really heartbreaking. Yeah, he doesn't get it. But from early on, he was like very obsessed about noodles and pasta dishes, which he still is. So I just came up with like child-friendly noodle dishes from how I grew up on, and he loved it. And so I realized it's like the Asian noodle landscape here in Berlin is just like whether you have like a China fried noodle box for €2 or you have a noodle soup, but between those two dishes, like whether like drained in soup or like fried to death, there's so much more. And I started to crave like the dry noodle dishes that I know from Thailand too. So I started to make like Kali, like all the good, great noodles dishes, and he grew up with that. But until he starts to be obsessed about potatoes and fish fingers, this is something. I think this is nothing that you can force onto kids, because I just can be glad that he's not pushing it so far away from him like I did it when I was a child. And I'm very happy that he is embracing that he is half Thai and half in German and is proud of it. I hope so. Yeah.
So, well, my baby's 8 months old and has just started having solids. She's really into strawberries. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'm excited for her because I feel like we've got so many, like, yeah, because it's the same how I grew up. Like, my mom had a large group of friends from everywhere. That food that I was exposed to definitely informed like my like experience of the world. And I think that Simran's going to have the same thing. Like, I've got some amazing friends who are here, who cook amazing food. I can't wait for her to eat it. I'm really scared of what she's going to get at the Kita. Because, yeah, I heard that it's not exactly the type of food I'm cooking, but I don't know. It's important that she gets her fish sticks from somewhere.
Yeah, before we close off, I'd just like to open the stage up a little bit to the audience and see if anybody have any questions for these two wonderful women here with me today.